All right, guys, I think we're ready to get rolling. Hey, I want to thank everybody for coming. We've got great turnout today. We've got more than 100 people that have already logged on, and close to 175 that have gotten signed up. So there's a lot of demand for the information. Really appreciate everybody's time. The goal today is to really try to go through and answer a lot of the questions that we have heard from our contractors that are dealing with the disposal, the cleanup, and the fire rebuilding issues. And so we've got with us today on the webinar from Marion County. They're all sitting around the conference table there. Brian Reich with Marion County Building and Planning Division Manager. Brian May, who is the Environmental Services Manager for the county. We have Chris Trussell, who is the county building official. Kim Aldrich, the on-site wastewater specialist. I believe Joe Fenimore, is there as the planning director. And I think that's it for the county. In addition,
we also have Mike. We also have with us Brian Nicholas, Public Works Director, and Lindsay King, Associate Planner.
Wonderful, wonderful. So great folks from the county there. We have Karen Walters with Coffin Butte with Republic Services. She's going to give us an update as to what's going on with the disposal rules. Michael Mortar, Tricia Goldsmith, and Brian Fordham from the State Insurance Division touching on some of the insurance issues. And we have Renata from the Council of Governments, and finally Jim Trett, the Mayor of Detroit. And so again, our goal here is to answer the questions that we've been hearing from our contractors. I know that we've got quite a few affected homeowners up the canyon who have joined us, and so certainly we know that you may find a lot of this information very valuable, but just recognize, of course, that the presentation is really kind of focused on the professional contractor community, and the questions they may be having certainly be a lot of overlap. And so with that, I'm going to turn the agenda over to Brian, or to Brandon. And Brandon will give us a quick update before turning it over to the rest of the team there at Marion County. So Brandon?
Mike, thank you for organizing this and for hosting this. You said it exactly right. We intend to provide the information that we know now, especially from the perspective of a contractor working with the property owner to redevelop and to recover after these wildfires. We may not have the information now. Things are changing quickly. We're discovering new information frequently. Information we don't have, we will get back to you so you can send out to people in your organization to be able to provide that. And we also may be doing this again in 2, 3, 4 weeks. As we get new information, it could be valuable to do. So thank you again. And I think we are starting with the debris removal, and Brian May.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So as we've moved away from the emergency portion of this disaster, we're moving into the debris removal phase. And one of the first phases we're focusing on is the hazardous waste removal. And we know there's a number of questions. One of those being, what options do property owners have? So the one option that's being led by FEMA state is to have EPA come in and do basically an abatement, a removal of the household hazardous waste. They will take some asbestos, but only if it's very obvious. But the first key for that for homeowners and businesses is they have to sign a right of entry. And that's up on our website and a number of different websites. That information is due by tomorrow, end of day. We really want to get as much of that done. Public Works Engineering Group's done a great job in getting people signed up. We think we've got about 75% of the homes affected have signed up for that right of entry already. So it's moving forward, even though it was a quick timeline. With that, in talking with EPA, teams have been assigned, and they anticipate having boots on the ground for training next week, and actually up in the canyon the week of the 26th. So they're moving forward. They anticipate that to be about a 30 to 45 day project to kind of do that initial sweep and get that material removed. Now, as far as property owners, they can have this work done too. There's a lot of caution to that, in the sense that we are dealing with hazardous waste. We know there's known asbestos. We know that there's heavy metals, there's things out there. So we really do not recommend a homeowner to go in and do that cleanup on their own. Now, if they want to hire a contractor to do that work and do things that are qualified, aware of abatement and proper procedures, you know, that's another story. If the homeowner chooses to do so, they can bring that material down to our household hazardous waste facility that's co-located at Skirts. the Salem Kaiser Transfer Station. We accept that material every Thursday from 8 to 3:30, and the first and third Tuesday from 8 to 3:30. Now, if a business or a contractor wants to bring that material to us, you have to set up an appointment. And that appointment will be done through Cleaning Services, and it's 360-772-2838. Their number will provide more information later on that, or you can go look at one of our websites for environmental services with that kind of detail. The key there is that the businesses will be charged a fee of $2.80 per pound. It is free to residents to bring that material in on those days. So just a key piece there. And again, the recommendation is we want professionals doing this kind of removal. Just from the health and human safety side, that's a big, big piece for us.
So Brian, everything you've just covered covers phase 1 cleanup household hazardous waste, right?
Correct.
Just for clarity, that piece of information,
that
that chunk of information Brian covered is phase 1 of the state lead cleanup. Right?
Yep. As we move into what they're calling phase 2 or ash and trash, one of the questions are, can property owners clean up their own property? I mean, the quick answer is yes. But again, we're strongly recommending that people do not do that, that at a minimum, they're getting a contractor in that understands the rules and regulations and how to properly handle this material. Again, concerned about asbestos and then also heavy metal contamination. As far as testing requirements, I appreciate the fact that Karen Walters will be on here. She'll be able to provide some more detail. But in who we've reached out to with Coffin Butte, we're directing everybody to their website at coffinbuttelandfill.com. That'll have some details, including contact information for Karen and Brock, their landfill manager. It'll go through their process. They'll talk about what testing requirements are needed and how to proceed. Once the site's been cleaned up, you know, as far as the removal of the ash and trash and the household hazardous waste, this is where we still get kind of some gray areas. I know we're over a month into this process so far, but DEQ has not yet determined what we're going to do as far as soils and the requirements there. There are some recommendations from EPA that they want to see 3 to 6 inches of soil removed, and this is part of what's happened in California and the California history with wildfires. That has not been determined for Oregon as of yet. In conversations with DEQ, they are leaning that way where they're going to highly recommend it, but they may look at some pre-soil sampling and post-soil sample to kind of determine the impact and how far that'll need to go. One of the biggest questions, as we've talked about, is where can ash and trash be disposed of? In Marion County, that's been the difficult part. We do not have a lined landfill or a Subtitle D landfill. We have the incinerator. A lot of this is ash or it's inert. It's going to be metal. It's going to be concrete. Stuff that doesn't work well in an incinerator, right? It's just not going to happen. So that's where we've been reaching out to landfills in the region and in the area. Depending on the test results, a DEQ Subtitle D approved landfill is what we're looking for. And that's why Coffin Butte's on the call today. They're the closest one to us for proximity. We also know that Hillsborough landfill is probably going to be able to take this material. Short Mountain landfill down in Eugene that handles primarily Lane County is kind of holding off from taking any out of county waste at this time because they have their own fire to deal with and do not know how much material is going to be coming into them. The question that kind of goes out there is if we get a so-called, you know, a hot sample, right? So something that would exceed the metals levels or something along that line that would not allow it to go to like a Coffin Butte or another Subtitle D landfill. At this point, we haven't crossed that bridge, but we know that there's only one landfill in the state that accepts that material, and that's in Arlington. So if we get those samples or we hear those samples, that'll be a complete different direction. But at this point, preliminary, we haven't had any kind of those results yet. So, and then Mike, I know you had a couple other questions. Anything I missed there?
Well, Brian, I think the questions that we've got in advance, and in fact, one came in here just a moment ago from Kyle Duran asking about estimated cost with the EPA cleanup. So can you touch on the financial responsibility for the cleanup? I know there was some confusion because I believe that right of entry form indicated that FEMA might ask to tap the available monies in the insurance policy. So can you tap on that phase one cleanup, how that's being paid for?
Right, so what we've been told and what we understand today for the phase one, the household hazardous waste portion, that's completely being handled. It's typically a 75-25 split with FEMA and then the local jurisdictions or state. The state has picked up that 25% tab. So at this point, there is no cost to the consumer if they signed up for the right of entry to have that removed, including, and just looking around a table of verification, that does not sound like there will be any bill to the insurance for that portion either. As we go to the phase two, the ash and trash, the intent is to do the cleanup. If there are funds within your insurance policy that's stated for debris cleanup and allocated specifically for that, then FEMA will most likely reach out and try to retrieve that from the insurance company. If your insurance is only stated as a one lump sum, the only way that FEMA will go after those monies is if there's residual money left after you've reconstructed, after you've rebuilt the home and reestablished. If for some reason you didn't use all of that allocated money, then they would try to receive that portion of the residual that's left.
So I tell you what, perhaps before we go to Karen with Republic Services, maybe I can defer to Michael and the team from the state, because they're going to be talking a little bit about some of the insurance issues surrounding financial responsibility and how that works with insurance policies. So Michael, Brian, Tricia, would you like to jump in here and address that?
Yeah, I'll just start in and then we can get to the honest boots on the ground subject matter experts, which would be Brian and Tricia in this case. So for those of you that don't know me, Michael Mortar, I'm a senior policy advisor with the Department of Consumer and Business Services, specifically working with the Insurance Commissioner's Office. I'm currently deployed in the state's emergency command center around the wildfire response. And so I'm working pretty closely with the other state agencies. I think Marion County did an excellent job of a high-level summary. I will provide a link, actually a couple of links once I get offline here, but one will be to an FAQ for the state wildfire cleanup, which I think is pretty helpful. And the second would be for our website at the Division of Financial Regulation. Certainly want folks, if they have specific insurance questions, to use us, to use Tricia's team, who's amazing on those issues. So with that, I'll defer now to Brian, who can talk about the structure of homeowner insurance coverage in the state and what that looks like for debris removal. Thanks, Brian.
Sure. Again, so my name is Brian Fordham. I'm the program manager of the Property and Casualty Product Regulation and Compliance team. And so we take a look at the upfront form filings and approve them, and then hold the insurers accountable in the back end for compliance. So the way that our policies are structured in our state, there will be the first coverage is called Coverage A, and it specifically covers the dwelling or the premises. And in some policies, it even extends to other structures as well. The way that debris removal is identified within Coverage A benefits for non-manufactured homes, so stick-built homes, the amount that would be available for debris removal costs would be the limit of Coverage A. For for mobile homes or manufactured structures, oftentimes there will be a set dollar amount, such as $500. In the case wherein reconstruction and debris removal max out the Coverage A limit, insurers will add an additional 5% to cover for debris removal. And that's how policies are written and work in the state. There are variances to this. You know, this is characterizing how policies are filed and what we've approved. Tricia, I think that you might have some additional insight on some of the questions and calls that we've been receiving in advocacy that might further help explain the policies.
Yeah, I'll just, again, my name is Tricia, and I'm the manager of the Consumer Advocacy and Outreach Unit. So we have an amazing team of advocates that are trained and ready to answer questions that consumers have, and then they'll also handle the complaints coming in. I think the unique thing, if we're talking just insurance, outside of any type of coordinated response, an insurance policy itself doesn't differentiate between step 1, the HHW, or step 2, the debris removal. Whatever coverage there is within the policy limit, like Brian said, manufactured structures, oftentimes that's a stated value amount. Under a stick-built home, it's often it's included in coverage A, and there's no limit on how much the policy would pay for debris removal. And if you max that benefit, oftentimes there is the additional percentage. So if a consumer chooses to just go direct and go through their insurance policy, it will use those benefits and what costs they incur if they hire a contractor, if they receive a bill, they will pay that. If it's a manufactured structure, it would come from the specific coverage dollar amount. If it's a stick-built home, it would just reduce their coverage A benefits by that amount. So that's specifically just how the typical homeowner's insurance policy works.
Okay, so if we've covered the insurance side, I do want to jump over to Karen Walters with Republic Services Coffin Butte. I think there's been a little bit of confusion out there, and partly because the state DEQ rules for testing may differ from what the landfills may require. In fact, I just had an email come in with that very question. So Karen, perhaps you can address what are the rules at Coffin Butte, and perhaps you can differentiate between what you may require versus what folks may read are state requirements.
Yeah, good afternoon. I am the special waste representative for Coffin Butte, and special waste would be pretty much everything that is not household hazardous waste. So it would include your ash, your soil, your debris, all of that type of material. Now, it is correct that different landfills will have different requirements. However, there is a base requirement that all landfills will adhere to. So starting out, I think it's best to talk about residential properties. Residential properties that contain material that's debris, ash, or soil. If the property was built prior to 2004, they will require a asbestos survey or some sort of asbestos test to accompany a profile. Now, a profile is something that we do at Coffin Butte, and most other landfills do as well. It just basically allows us to gather information about yourself, about the waste, what it's being used for, where it came from, as well as some of the testing reports that will come along with that. So again, for debris, ash, soil that is residential, we will require an asbestos survey or asbestos report. For those homes that were built after 2004, we will not require any asbestos testing or a survey. It can just be profiled and it'll come on into the landfill. Now, for any debris, ash, soil that contains asbestos of greater than 1%, those would be, again, in homes that were built prior to 2004. They will need to, again, have it tested and surveyed for asbestos. And just recently, and there's been some confusion here, as of a day ago, DEQ has dropped the requirement for running Tclp metals tests. So that is a big burden, I think, that's going to be lifted, as it does require some time to get those tests run, and it's going to be able to get your profiling ready faster so that you can go ahead and dispose faster. So again, just an asbestos test or survey will be required for that. Now, for commercial properties, again, whether it be building structure, debris, ash, soil, anything that contains any of those items will need, again, an asbestos survey and or test. Again, these are by certified asbestos consultants, and we do have a list of that on our website at coffinbuttelandfill.com/wildfires. Anything in addition, if it is debris, ash, soil, containing asbestos of greater than 1%, it will also require the Tclp metals test. We also have a listing of analytical testing laboratories on our website that will go ahead and provide you with the information on that as well. I know it's a lot of information, is a little confusing for everybody, but just to kind of break it down, I can be reached. My email address is kwalters, that's K as in Karen, Walters, WALTERS, at republicservices.com. I will be your main contact in assessing and helping you through this process, providing you with the profile paperwork, helping you find an abatement contractor, or taking an asbestos or Tclp analysis. Once we have all that information tied together into a nice little packet, typically it will go on to our approvals group, who will take a look at the analytical results and the profile form and basically give their approval. And at that point, we will be ready to go, and you'll be issued a manifest that will allow you to bring the material into the landfill. Now, the landfill is open Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And currently right now, I've been getting a lot of questions about dumpster rental and how to bring the material into the Coffin Butte landfill. Unfortunately for Sandium Canyon, we do not have resources there to be able to provide you with dumpsters. Maybe somebody else here on the call might have a resource for you, but we can certainly go ahead and refer you to other companies that may be able to assist you with that. Don't know if I covered everything or not. It was kind of fast.
Well, Karen, thank you. And I just put a link there in the chat feature for anybody that wants to download the latest guidelines from Coffin Butte that were updated yesterday, as Karen indicated. And Karen, I know there's some confusion because I believe Coffin Butte's page did not have that updated earlier. Have those guidelines been now posted to the webpage?
They have not, unfortunately. I am sending them out by hand. So if you do want to receive them, you can certainly go ahead and email me, and I will send those guidelines directly to you. We hope to have the website back up and running with those particular guidelines. All other information is still accurate on the website. Yeah, we probably need another 8 hours or so before that will be updated.
Okay, so I have posted those ones here in the chat feature. And just a reminder for everybody on the call, if you have a question, please use the Q&A button, not the chat feature, if you use the Q&A button. So I tell you what, we want to move on beyond cleanup and disposal, but I will ask one question from Marion County. This came in from Laura Dorn, and that is, with only metal roof and ash remaining on the site, which of course is the case with a lot of these burned sites, how does one determine the difference between phase 1 and phase 2 cleanup?
Want me to answer that?
Go for it.
Frankly, that is the role of EPA's contractor that they'll bring on board. So they do this, they don the hazmat suits, they walk around, do a visual survey, and they will recover whatever items that they determine fall in that household hazardous waste category. So other than that, I don't know that we can give anybody any better clarification than that.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then Karen, one more for you that just came in. Is there a set standard for Coffin Butte about the asbestos survey requirements, i.e. number of samples, et cetera?
It is required that you do hire a certified asbestos company. And as far as number of samples go, basically we leave it up to you. You know your property site. What we want is we want a representative sample of everything that you will be disposing of at the landfill. So that could either be a couple of grab samples from different piles around the area, some of the wood or some of the ash, or you can do a composite where you accumulate a little bit of each one of those materials and combine it into one sample and send that off. But we are leaving it up to you and your judgment.
Wonderful.
Hey, Mike, if I might, before we go much further away from the insurance question, I just want to follow up real quick, if that's all right.
Please do.
Yes, so I just wanted to clarify, I've been in a conversation with my colleagues and I unfortunately missed this early on. So we'll just clarify for the record that FEMA's engagement is to provide the 75% match, right, on the front end. We talked about the 75-25 split. That 25% still to be determined, right? Is it the state? Is it the state working in conjunction with the locals? That decision should be made shortly in terms of the consolidated debris removal. But when it comes to the private insurance component, so if someone has insurance that's available, it is not FEMA then billing for that insurance 2 years after the rebuild is wrapped up. It's actually local government. So assuming that Marion County participates in that process, they would be working with insurers to see if there had been insurance money available for that rebuild. It's not FEMA. I just wanted to clarify that.
Great. One more question came in, and that is, can metal roofing and siding be taken in for recycling?
What we're trying to do is avoid having burnt material brought into our transfer stations, largely because, again, the concerns of asbestos and heavy metals. If you have just typical normal metal debris, yes, we can take that out of our transfer stations in the area. We are working on trying to set up some drop sites up the canyon still, working with vendors such as Cherry City Metals and others to get something more local for people to work on, but those have not yet been established. As far as the contractor, your best bet would be to, contact directly with Cherry City, or as Karen mentioned, the local garbage hauler is Pacific Sanitation. That's who you'd want to reach out for containers or drop boxes.
Great. And then I do want to move us past the questions that we're getting on disposal. I'll just ask one final one. Somebody is asking clarification on cost of the phase 2 cleanup after insurance is billed. What kind of costs are there to the homeowner?
Brian, you got that one, or you?
I'm sorry, would you ask the question again?
After insurance is billed, what kind of costs are there to the homeowner on phase 2?
All right, so this one takes a little bit of explanation, and yes, I apologize. There's a little bit of government speak here, but under FEMA regulation, I'm going to tell you the gory details so everybody understands the situation. Under FEMA regulations, the state is obligated to recover if the state comes in and does the phase 2 cleanup, they're obligated by FEMA to at least attempt to recover any insurance proceeds that cover the very same work. The idea is under FEMA regulation, a property owner is not entitled to compensation from their insurance company and the federal government for the very same thing. So, ODOT and the state of Oregon are dancing a very fine line here, and they've said this in 2 separate forums. They've put out a press release and they've posted it on the DEQ website. Their approach is going to be that if a property owner signs up for phase 2 cleanup and the state and feds clean up their property site, FEMA will make the state attempt to recover any insured costs. However, the state's going to wait until you've rebuilt your home, and once they, through the building process, learn that through, I assume, a certificate of occupancy or something like that, once they know that the construction is complete, they will then contact the property owner to find out if there are any unspent insurance funds that are recoverable. And if there are not, then the state will report to FEMA that they attempted to collect, but there's nothing there to collect. So I know that doesn't make some people feel very comfortable because it is wishy-washy. It is the process by which ODOT is demonstrating to the feds that they are going to attempt, but they are not going to pursue it very vigorously. Anything that might be covered by insurance. If your insurance policy states a coverage limit for debris removal, and let's say it's $5,000, for instance, they will contact you and they will ask to collect that $5,000. But if your insurance policy does not state a specific coverage limit for debris removal, then they're going to use the process that I just told you about. The frustrating aspect of this for people is they want a concrete statement. Well, ODOT can't give any more concrete statement other than the description of the process they're going to do without violating FEMA regulations and basically giving up the state's eligibility for this federal reimbursement, right? So the state's asking everybody to understand the situation. They've put this out in writing in a couple of places, and they put it on the DEQ website, so it is there in writing, and people can refer to it if there's any question in the future. Does that make sense? Sorry, it's not better covered. In the insurance world, I know we like to have these things very tight and clean. This is not a clean situation. It's government trying to meet another government's regulatory requirement without harming people.
So guys, I want to keep us moving because we've got a lot to cover here. I think we could probably talk about disposal issues for hours. But at this point, let's turn to Chris Trussell, who is Marion County's building official. And Chris is going to talk about the various issues surrounding permitting of the structures as we get going for rebuilding.
Hello, everybody. This is Chris Trussell, Marion County building official. We are starting the rebuilding process as for permitting. Kind of right now, some of the general questions that are coming in is what is our jurisdictional authority and where do we cover up the canyon for building permits and septic permit issuance. So Marion County unincorporated covers everything that is up the canyon and also within the city limits of Idana, Gates, and also City of Detroit within the city limits. So if you cross over into Lynn County within Idana and Gates, we are covering that for the building permits and septic permit issuance. Now, as for the permits where you apply for those within those city limits, those will be applied through the city hall in each of those cities. Currently, right now, some of those cities are not up and functioning, and we are aware that City of Detroit is working on getting a temporary city hall established currently within Mill City. As for Gates and Idana, I am not sure on the status of their operation. I think Renata is kind of working with those cities to get that established, and once I get more information, I can move on forward. As for our permitting processes, we're basically going as a standard procedure as we have. If you're in the unincorporated Marion County, you apply through us and also apply through our planning department for land use applications. Within the cities, it's within the cities. Let's see here. So yeah, that covers kind of the two general first questions we had there. I'll proceed on forward here a little bit. Oh, you talking?
Can we just point out, since you're talking jurisdictional issues, can you talk about where Lynn County covers on the building permitting?
Lynn County, that would cover anything outside the city limits of Idana and Gates. And then they cover the city of Mill City and Marion County side. And then as for Mahama, we cover on the north side of the river there. Everything else is the south of the river. Okay. To proceed on here, a lot of questions have been coming in about what building code can we rebuild to. Marion County currently will accept building reconstruction to a previous code through an alternate materials and method application, provided that the original construction plans can be generated, and we would then go to the most prevalent code at the time that it was constructed to. Now, with that being said, there are several plans that have came in that have been designed to a previous code that have been engineered, and majority of those plans will still have the engineering redone to today's standards, just because of the way how the engineering process works and the engineering firms, how they will calculate that. So you'll kind of work with them on that side of stuff. Other than that, if you're basically reconstructing to the same footprint, not enlarging the footprint, not changing the location on the property, we'll accept that alternate means and method per request from the contractors or homeowners. If you're going to be relocating those homes and enlarging them, then we'll be looking at building the most current standard, which is currently the 2017 ORSC, which will soon be the 2019. With the existing codes being used, we're still going to be looking at requiring current code requirements for fire and life safety aspects of the construction. So that would be your smoke detectors, CO detectors, emergency egress windows, stairs, rise, run, guardrails, handrails, that kind of stuff. So we'll still apply those current code requirements to a pre-existing construction. As for assessing existing foundations, we really don't have the expertise within Marion County Building Department to determine the structural integrity of those existing systems. So we'll be asking for a design professional or an engineer, anybody that's competent in that field to determine the structural integrity of those foundation systems, to determine whether to compromise for structural integrity. So from what I've been hearing so far from the majority of the clients out there that have had this looked at, majority of the foundations that were exposed to the fire directly have been compromised and need to be removed for reconstruction. So I just recommend you work with a design professional of some sort that can analyze those systems to make sure that it's suitable to rebuild. So if there's any questions on that, I can take that right now. I know that's been a big concern for a lot of people.
So Chris, we do have a question that came in asking, what if no county records exist on a particular property?
It depends on the situation and what type of records you're looking for, whether it's building records, septic records, kind of depends. I guess if that question could be directed more toward a specific situation, I could answer it a little bit better.
Yeah, we'll keep moving only because that's the only question we had. It was typed in.
So how does the status of the utility connections affect the permit? As for affecting the permit, the only utility connection that we really have control of for the permit issuance is our on-site water connection. So that's the connection to the existing foundation or existing septic system. Basically, we'll have to do an authorization approval prior to issuing the building permit. That authorization approval will require some steps that Kim will cover in the next segment. And once we've determined that that existing system is adequate to reconnect to, we would then be able to issue the building permit along with that. So it's our normal permitting process that we currently do. There's not really much difference on that. It's more of looking at the existing system and making sure it's still suitable to connect to. Is debris required to be removed before rebuilding begins? Currently, Marion County does not have any requirements to provide verification that the debris needs to be removed from the property prior to reconstruction. That's going to be up to the property owners to do that safely. We highly recommend that all the debris gets removed prior to starting the rebuild. Main thing is what we'll be looking at from a building inspection standpoint is that the site is safe and suitable for us to actually come up there and perform the inspections from a safety standpoint on us. Brian made a very interesting comment about DEQ and whether they're going to require soil removal prior to rebuilding. If that is the case, that's going to kind of change this dynamic quite a bit, and we'll have to address that situation as that comes and develops, because that will really affect potentially some of our on-site septic systems. As for general questions that's being asked, that's kind of the majority of them. If there's anything else I can answer, I'd be glad to.
Yeah, so Chris, we had a couple questions came in on non-conforming setbacks, but we'll wait. We'll have Joe address that here in a little bit. we have a question. What is the timing of the septic permit that you require?
The timing of the septic permit kind of determines on what extent of evaluation we have to do of the septic system, whether a certified contractor is involved to analyze the system, whether some repairs have to be made. Right now, we don't have a defined timeline other than our standard timelines that we're looking at. Each of them are going to change from time to time, depending on the type of situation we're dealing with. So I don't have a real defined timeline right at this point.
Okay. We do have a question, again, going back to a lack of records, and we might just suggest that folks just reach out to you directly, Chris, perhaps if these are older properties that don't have records. Could you provide maybe your contact information that folks would reach out to you at?
Sure, no problem. Yeah, my direct number is 503-588-3977, or excuse me, 503-566-3977. And then my email address is ctrussell, Trussell, @co.marion.or.us.
Great. And we do have a septic question, so this might be a good time to go to Kim, and we can address the septic questions that folks may have.
Oh, here we go. I know everybody's got lots and lots of questions, and I have to say that as we go and look at these sites, we're going to get a whole lot more, and each site is going to be site-specific, situation-specific. So I'm going to give some general answers to here, but I would like people to know that we're going to have to address each parcel and each situation. So one of the first things that we came across after the fire was how do we evaluate a current existing system that has been damaged or impacted by the fire. So I collaborated with five installer contractors, septic contractors, and we came up with a document that to help them understand and the other people that are out there exactly what to look for, and so that they could thoroughly evaluate that septic system so that that homeowner had all the information that they needed to make decisions about their septic and the rebuild process. That document will be posted on the site. It's going through the final approvals. It's got primary approval, and I think it's going to be a really valuable piece of information for everybody involved. And then once that information is determined, we've gone out to the site, the certified and licensed installer's gone out to the site, he's evaluated visually any potential damages, setback concerns, that situation. That document will be submitted with the authorization application if you want to. You don't have to, but it may help expedite that process. But we're gonna look at visual damage is going to be a really big part of it. How was this system affected by the fire? So as I've been out to a few sites, I've seen a few places that were some pretty big devastation when it comes to septic, but out of the 15 probably places that I've been on, 2 of those were that way. Most of them were in pretty good shape septic-wise. I think that has to do with a lot of these, they're underground and they're cushioned by the soil, so that protected it against the fire. We got up into Detroit area. I've had some installers send me pictures where we had treatment units that it was excessive heat and there was severe damages. So I'm thinking that when I'm able to get up there, we're going to find a little bit more severe things, some little bit more major repairs. And I would like to mix up the questions just a little bit. It is, when is an authorization inspection required? Well, per DEQ rules, an authorization inspection is required when any dwelling is replaced or when an RV is hooked up to a septic system. And with that rule, there's a really low bar when it comes to authorizing a connection of a replacement dwelling to an existing septic system. So there's 2 different ways it can be done. So if there's no increase in flow, so if you had a 2-bedroom home going into the fire and you're going to put in a 2-bedroom home now, okay? and if the system is not failing, all setbacks between that existing system and the structure can be maintained, and in my opinion, or the opinion of the agent, it would not create a public health hazard on the ground surface or in public surface water, that system will be signed off on, okay? If there is an increase in flow or a change in use to the existing system that is of no greater than 50% of the original design capacity and no more than 300 gallons, and there's a full system replacement area available that meets siding requirements except for potentially groundwater conditions, I can waive those a little. So let's use a scenario. So if we had a 2-bedroom home going in and somebody wants to upgrade this system to a 3-bedroom home, per DEQ guidelines, that would be less than the 50%. It wouldn't be more than 300 gallons. So there would be, as long as there was no visual damage to the septic system, that increase in flow would be approved. Let's see. And then when is a system, I keep hearing, oh, we're gonna have to upgrade our septic system. We're gonna have to upgrade our septic system. Only when you exceed the authorization criteria. So more than a 50% increase in flow to your system. You choose to move the drain field because it's in the way of where you want to build, then you're going to have to upgrade your system. And potentially, if it's a cesspool or a pipe to the river, and I've heard that I might run into those a few, and I have seen one cesspool. Cesspools there's a way I can permit those, but they have to be done the proper way. Pipe to the river, we will go and evaluate, and we will take that into consideration when sizing a system because we can't continue to allow a straight pipe to the river. But as towards repair permits, I really feel like for the most part, from what I've seen and what my installers have reported to me, that there's going to be a lot of minor repairs, some tanks, some control panels, some risers, a few drop boxes. We might have to move around a this or that. But I'm actually feeling pretty good. The fire seemed to move pretty fast. It didn't stick around very long. So because of that, it didn't heat the soil up real hot. That's frying our drain field. Let's see what else. I do recommend that if you have a plastic tank or a cement tank even, where there's been a burn over it, I recommend that you put it on a watertight test. There was one site that I went out to where I saw that it melted the aluminum rims on the RV. That takes a temperature in the excess of 1,200 degrees. That's pretty hot. That might melt a plastic tank. So I would recommend doing a watertight test. It's not going to be required unless I see visual damage or the installer sees visual damage. But I definitely would follow those installers' leads. I have people already out there on the ground performing these inspections. They put these systems in. They know what they're looking for, and I would follow their lead. If they think that you should put that tank on a watertight test and you are concerned and you don't think it should be, feel free to call me and we can talk about it. As towards non-conforming tanks and setbacks, they're not addressed in the authorization rule, so they would be accepted. However, it's got to be a real tank. It can't be a culvert in the ground. A 50-gallon drum is not a real tank, and a buried car is not a real tank. These are not real tanks. So we need to have a real septic tank, and then we're going to look at how it affects the rest of the system, and each system will be judged on a case-by-case scenario basis. I'm sorry I can't give a blanket statement, but there's I don't really think that the criteria to approving these is really tough.
So Kim, I think we've got a couple of questions that came in here, and maybe you've addressed this, but for septic systems that were grandfathered in pre-loss, will folks be able to reconnect to those, or do they need to upgrade to the latest codes?
Well, I think that we addressed that with the previous questions, that we're basically going to approve these based on current codes, as long as they're real. So is a real septic tank, 500-gallon tank was put in, and there's no visual damage to that tank, and there's no increase in flow greater than 50% of the original design capacity, that tank will be approved. I will take into consideration the setbacks to the river. I do know that I'm going to run into some situations where we're going to have limited setbacks. Those are also not addressed in the authorization rule, but they are something that we need to take into consideration. And again, that will be judged on a case-by-case, situation-by-situation basis.
Okay. Question is asked, why is the building permit being held up by the septic permit? Can't the building permit be issued while the septic system is being certified and inspected? You can always hold up the occupancy certificate for it if need be.
I'm going to let Chris answer that one.
So that's general procedure that we have, because in order for us to issue a dwelling permit, we have to have a suitable buildable site and also suitable connection available for the house to be connected to it. So in order for us to have a suitable site, we have to have an approved authorization to connect to, otherwise it's not suitable to be built on. So it's basically procedural based. Also from us, it stands into the land use process and application stuff in a way also. So that's something that we could potentially look at in some sort of emergency clause due to the circumstances, but that's basically our general procedure of how we do that through the permitting process. Okay. Not the best answer, but.
And Kim, a question for you from Kyle Duran. Is the list of the certified installers available that was included in your initial group?
Of the 5 guys that helped me, I can't give out their names and say, these are the guys that helped me. But we do have a list of certified installers on our county website.
Okay, great. And then finally, I think this is a different question. The septic evaluation inspections, are they covered in costs paid by FEMA, or are property owners responsible for that? Of course, I think we know that's the property owner. That's not going to be a FEMA coverage, but that question was asked.
Okay.
And I have no further questions that have come in on septic. And so, Joe, let's move over to you, and you can talk about non-conforming setbacks and all the rest of the planning issues.
So the planning issues we identified, there's 2 things. They're in the resource zone, the farm and forest zone. You have the language in the code saying, unintentionally destroyed, you must commence rebuilding within 1 year. That same language is used for the non-conforming section. That same stuff applies. Too close for setbacks, you have to commence building within, replacement within 1 year. There is no definition of our code and replacement. Our commencement, we always assumed it was obtaining the permit. We talked to the board, and we decided that in situations like this, you can't do anything until you clean up. So the first step in commencing the replacement is the cleanup. So as long as you begin your cleanup process within 12 months of when the fire occurred, we're going to recognize that as commencing the rebuild. We may need, at some point, I'm guessing some lenders will want verification of that. We will gladly do letters. If you do want something farther, we will do a land use permit if you choose, if you want to do that, but it's not necessary at this time, we don't believe. And that's basically all I have at this moment.
Okay, so again, for our attendees, if you have questions for Joe or for anybody else, use that Q&A feature, and we will we'll pose those to our panelists. But if we have nothing for Joe at this point, maybe we can turn to Renata, and we can have her address kind of the issues surrounding some of our cities that don't have city halls anymore, or at least don't have city halls that are open. So Renata?
Hi everyone, Renata Wakely, Mid-Willamette Council of Governments. We're a public entity that provides contract planning services for our member governments. That includes Detroit, Gates, and Idana. I've got Mayor Trett on the phone, as you all see. So I'm going to let him answer some of these questions, and I defer to my cities. We are an extension of our cities when we provide these planning services. I know the mayor and council are working on a temporary city hall in Mill City. I heard from Gates this week that I believe they are hoping after fire mitigation or smoke mitigation to open their city hall next week. When it comes to land use codes, I also have McRae, who's on the line here. She's a contract planner for Council of Governments and working within these cities. we have conducted what I'm calling an audit of the city codes to see what the city's local codes say when it comes to our setbacks, RVs, temporary structures, tiny homes, and what opportunities the cities might have in loosening what could be barriers to redevelopment. For example, when a city code says that if you had a non-conforming structure that was destroyed by fire, it has to conform with current code. We will be working with our cities to see what they would like to do when it comes to loosening those codes, all within meeting state building code requirements, which are outside of their controls. But we've already started to engage with our cities on what those options might be. And that is a locally driven decision for those communities. So Mayor Trett knows that we'll be scheduling meetings and working via an emergency ordinance process to make it easier to rebuild. Of course, we work very closely with Marion County, who serves as our building officials, and they provide guidance to us on what the building code limitations are. So I think my point on being on this phone call is to just let you all know that we'll be working with our communities to look at what could be barriers for the redevelopment, offering those options to our cities, and then they will be amending their codes as appropriate for them. And with that, I'll let Mayor Trett speak as well.
Good afternoon. I guess I'm ready just for questions. Our city staff is up and running thanks to the generosity of the Council of Governments. Our staff is located in their building right now. We are attempting to move a modular home from Sweet Home up to Mill City, which would become our temporary city hall until we can get one rebuilt in Detroit. So best way to contact our staff at this point is by phone at the regular phone number or by email. They are answering phones and answering emails. It can be kind of difficult to get into the office, but arrangements for that can be made after a phone call or an email.
Great. And Mayor, I know we've had a number of questions that I've heard from our builders. Perhaps could you provide an update on the water situation in Detroit? Certainly if folks are wanting to rebuild, they're wanting to know when water would be available.
That's a moving target right now. Our contract engineering firm, HBH and Rob Henry, got in there a couple of weeks ago and made a preliminary estimate. The main treatment facility is destroyed. Our lift station from the Brighton Bush River, which is our primary water source, is in good shape, but the pumps at the Brighton Bush are not in good shape either. Our alternate source is Mackey Creek, which is not providing a lot of water now. When the engineers were able to get into that basin, their comment was, it looks like a bomb went off up there. So the question is going to be quality of water that's going to come down Mackey Creek when all that runoff hits. We also have the same concern for the Brighton Bush. Right now, their preliminary estimate is we will not have water back in the pipes for at least 8 weeks. Thanks to Marion County, we're getting some water up there for some residents who are moving back in for various reasons, beginning today or tomorrow. But that will be limited to drinking water and some maybe non-potable water. We're working on those issues right now. But for water coming through the pipes for the city water system, we believe we're looking at 8 weeks, maybe longer.
Okay. Thank you for that update. So we do have some questions that have come in for a variety of our panelists. And again, before we wrap up the call, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A feature. Builder Chuck Foster asks, what criteria will be used, and this is not for Mayor Trett, this is for Kim. What criteria will be used for how far setbacks will be to existing wells to septic fields?
Well, the wells will be dependent upon the date that the home was built. The original home was sited. I have records that allow for a 50-foot setback pre-1974.
Okay, so I think that answers that. And Builder Larry Ballou asks a question perhaps for Chris. Can an outbuilding be built prior to the residence being built?
So currently, right now, from Marion County Unincorporated, our planning department has allowed for them to reconstruct detached accessory structures prior to residents being rebuilt. As for the cities, I am not sure where their stance is on that. So hopefully they have an answer for that here shortly for people.
So I'll try. Typically within city incorporated zones, you have to have a primary structure to have an accessory structure. We will check the 3 codes to see if that is currently not allowed. I'm going to assume that it is not, and we can present this information to each of the city councils to determine whether they want to change that regulation. So if we're going to follow up with a call in 2 weeks or whenever that time is, I hope to have an answer to that, what the current code says. But typically not. It may be an option for cities to change the code if there is a high demand for that. And I understand storage of materials as part of the building process is important.
We've got a question. Will Marion County issue permits in Detroit before the water system is operational?
Yeah, we have no requirements for potable water to be on site prior to building permit issuance. It will affect potential inspection processes as for testing, depending on the way the tests are performed. But it will definitely need to be online prior to we having a final C of O and final building inspection. So hopefully by that time occurs, they'll have the water system back up and running.
Thanks, Chris. Chris, another question for you, and this came in actually via the chat feature. Just to ask folks, please use the Q&A, easier for us to track. But question is, I heard someone say foundations are no longer sound and need to be replaced due to them being subjected to the heat. Has there been any testing to support this, or is testing and proof of soundness an option?
The only information I have is what I have researched from past fires and just general documentation. Basically, from what the consensus is if your foundation system was subject to 500 degrees or more, it is most likely compromised. As for testing procedures, I'm not familiar with what is available out there. With that being said, from a county standpoint, we need some sort of verification to determine they're suitable to rebuild on.
So Chris, just to follow up on that then, if somebody was to bring in a report from a structural engineer saying that the foundation was fine, would that suffice?
That would suffice for the structural integrity. We'd still need to analyze the existing foundation for the rebuild of the home to make sure it's suitable for whatever construction they decide to build on top of it.
Great. Okay, so we have no more questions that have been submitted. Do we have anything else that any of our panelists would like to address before we wrap up?
Yeah, Mike, this is Brian May again. One question I guess we have for your members are they experiencing any hangups or roadblocks that we could try to address?
Yeah, I think a number of those may have been posed here, but that's something that we're in communication with our folks on, and certainly we're going to be in communication with the county if and when that happens.
Great. Thank you.
Can I add one more thing? This is Kim. I would encourage people not to do evaluation of their drain field and tank area until debris removal has been done. I think that's really, really important. Because it does run the potential, especially after listening to Brian about maybe some soils being removed. We really need to evaluate how that's going to affect that drain field. And then also I have received several statements that people have fallen in compromised tanks. I do have one that I know for sure of. So it's very important that people find their tanks safely, flag them off so that people know where they are, because thin-walled plastic can be dangerous. Concrete can fracture. That can be dangerous. And we don't need people falling in septic tanks. I do know that the county has provided, there's 100 bundles with flagging at the hall. What's that hall? Anthony Hall. Anthony Hall, for those that can't afford to get stakes and flagging to flag off their tanks and their drain fields, to protect their drain fields and create safety. That's it.
Okay, so some more questions coming in here. Are there going to be any regulation or requirements on tree removal?
Again, great question. We do not have an answer for that as of yet, on what's going to be entailed in kind of what we're calling phase 2 with the ash and trash. I know for road right-of-ways, different things, that those are being addressed at hazard trees right now, but more to come, I guess, on that. We'll keep everybody posted.
And probably important to point out that the tree regulations may differ based on whether you're in unincorporated Marion County or if you're in one of the jurisdictions. So you want to check with the individual jurisdiction, certainly. Couple questions on property surveys. So perhaps we can address any need for property surveys and how that would work.
Yeah, there might be some sites that would need to have their property surveyed, mainly due to building locations on the property, whether they're really on the true property or not, for building and also septic. There is some concerns that there are existing structures that may not be built on the actual owner's parcel that they own, and could be overlying into a different adjoining property. So those are all some concerns we have. Those will all be addressed case by case as we run into situations that may require some additional survey. Just to let you know, property surveys of privately owned properties, that is at the subject of the owner to get that taken care of.
Okay. And then somebody's asking the best department to call regarding property surveys. So would they go through your department, Chris, going through the building department at least initially?
Not necessarily. I guess unless there's specific questions in regards to the building permitting process, land use process, or septic, I could be a good contact for that. Our survey department, once again, being on private property, they have no jurisdiction or authority to address that from a surveying standpoint. So yeah, I can screen those calls as they come in and get to the direct channels.
Okay.
And this is Brandon. So our county surveyor, they have records of surveys and plats that have been recorded, and they're glad to provide those to people if they can use them for their own property to discover property lines and identify those. The county surveyor is 503-588-5155. I think based on what I'm hearing in the field, from what Kim's gone out and seen how far the soil burned in some situations, that properties that were surveyed that have pins, there could still be pins in the ground. And maybe there is an ability to identify those pins and find out where those property lines are using that. The county would certainly like, we'd all like to be able to give support to locating the property lines, especially inside cities where there's been a lot of damage in there. We don't have the resources yet, but we're still keeping an eye out. We're still looking for something to do in that area to help. That's beyond what we're used to doing, and so it's something additional we're looking for resources for.
Okay. Are there going to be driveway permit applications required on replacement dwellings? And if so, are there any exceptions for grading construction issues on non-conforming locations?
Have you heard, Chris?
I have not heard of any direction of where our LDEP department's going in relation to driveway permits. That would be a good question for our LDEP department to answer. That's about the most information I have at this time.
So Marion County is set up a little different. We have a land development engineering that reviews driveways. I know most cities, the planning department seem like they do driveways as well. So we'll follow up on that question about what driveway requirements are in the rural area. Within cities, that's maybe Renata, I think that would be something where they contact the city most often to say, are there any driveway permitting for rebuilding?
So I will note the question. I generally, I would say if you have an existing driveway permit, a new one will not be required if you're moving. So on a replacement structure, if you're not moving that driveway, you should be okay. Of course, that varies on whether we're talking about a local street, which is subject to the city's jurisdiction, if it's a county road within the city, or whether we're talking about Highway 22. But I've noted the question and we'll do some research on that.
Great, thank you. We've got a question on soil removal, and I think this probably goes back to the issue of EPA perhaps requiring excavation to a certain depth. Question is, on soil removal, does that mean the entire site or just at the building location?
Again, that has not been determined as of yet, nor the magnitude of how, how far reaching that'll be. So again, more information will come there.
Okay. Question here, how are site-specific debris removal costs determined?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know that has been determined or if anybody's done any look at that. I know from some aspects, people are just getting quotes from contractors to come look at that and try to assess the cleanup themselves. But we have no guidance as far as that goes right now.
Okay. And since we're talking about cleanup still, somebody's got a question as to whether primary homeowners and secondary homeowners are treated differently when it comes to billing on phase 2. Apparently there's been conflicting information.
And again, I'd agree with that statement. Right now, we don't necessarily have real clear guidance on the phase 2. We know that phase 1, that we're moving forward. It does not matter whether it's a primary or a secondary, but we'll get some more clarification as far as the phase 2, the ash and trash section.
Okay. And I've had some questions, and Chris, I forget if you addressed this during your presentation, but did you talk at all about the action that the county commissioners have taken on permit waivers, on fee waivers, that should be for permits?
I can, no big deal. Okay. So yeah, the Board of Commissioners have signed and approved an order to waive or refund building permit fees for the admin costs for building permits and septic permits for primary dwelling repairs and replacements of damaged structures. With that being said, basically what we're looking at is if the building is being rebuilt within the same footprint, same size, it's the primary residence of the property owner, those fees would be waived for the initial building permit and the initial septic authorization permit, or potential repair permits needed for the septic system. That does not go beyond the primary dwelling. So vacation homes, detached accessory structures, any other things other than the primary dwelling are not subject to those fee waivers.
So, and I can add a little bit to Brandon again, that the board went for primary homes in order to support people returning to living in these communities and being reestablished. We did an estimate, it was at the board session, about 1.2 million is the expected fee waiver amount. And we are cognizant of finding the resources and ensuring that we can still waive those fees while retaining adequate staff to perform all the work we know we need to do toward the recovery. And at this point, we're confident that we will achieve that.
Great, thanks. Question here from one of our builders. How long of a waiting period if the homeowner wants to have FEMA remove phase 1 or phase 2? So if I'm understanding that, I think the question is, what's the timing? If the homeowner is going to wait for the government effort to do the phase 2 cleanup, how long is that wait going to be?
Again, great question. What we know is that phase 1 will commence, like I mentioned, the week of the 26th of October. From that point, we're anticipating probably 30 to 45 days. We hope that there's boots on the ground in a sense that phase 2 prior to phase 1 ending, but that has not been determined yet, nor the contracts or who will be doing that work. So again, sorry for not a good answer, but we'll provide as much information as we get it.
And as a follow-up, a question here is being asked, how is cleanup being scheduled, cities versus unincorporated areas?
Again, that's still to be determined. My understanding, even on the phase 1 portion with EPA, that they will be up in the canyon this next week doing that kind of evaluation and schedule. They plan to have as many as 10 teams going through doing the cleanup. In a sparse area, they're saying that that's 5 to 6 sites a day. In a dense population, it's probably closer to 15 to 25. So It's all gonna depend on where it is. That's been our biggest push for the right of entry forms, is the quicker that those get in, the quicker that plan can get put in place and how they can schedule the teams out there to do the work, so.
Great, thanks. So that is all the questions that we've got submitted so far. So we may be getting close to wrapping up. I'll just point out for those that are on the call that are affected homeowners, I just want to stress the importance of doing your research when you hire a contractor. We've already heard stories. We have examples from other disasters around the country where folks come in, scam artists try and take advantage of folks. And so we'd hate to have that happen to anybody up the canyon. So certainly when you're hiring a contractor, the Home Builders Association would really urge you to check references, to call those references and make sure that folks were happy with the job that was done. Many have been looking for contractors. We've gone out to our members and we've assembled a list of about 50 builders right now who have said they are taking and open to taking jobs in the Santiam Canyon. And so if you're still looking for a builder, you can go to the Home Builders website. That's homebuildersassociation.org/fire_recovery. Or if you're on our website, it's under resources. So again, just really urge folks to be careful when you're hiring a contractor. Check their license at the contractors board, check those references, and just don't be a victim like some folks may be. So that is it for our questions. We are going to have this, this presentation is recorded. We'll have it uploaded to our YouTube channel, hopefully later today. We'll have an email that goes out to everybody with the contact information for everybody on this call, the panelists. And then links to some of the information that was presented. So I want to thank all of our panelists for being on the call. Thanks all of our attendees for taking your time to be on it. Hope you found it valuable, and best of luck to all as you begin the recovery process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.